Chapter 9. The Escape of a Witness. For a moment, the aliens remained still, their eerie, fluid-like suits adjusting in rhythmic pulses, their tendrils flickering faint shades of indigo. The hum of their presence blended into the forest, making every leaf, every twig, every blade of grass feel suspended in their invisible field of influence. Then, a sudden rustle. The interruption from behind a nearby bush. A raccoon bolted out, its tiny claws skittering against the dirt as it launched into a frantic sprint away from the clearing. The moment it moved, the aliens turned sharply, their shifting gemstone eyes contracting, their tendrils stiffening as they tracked the creature with an unnatural precision. For half a second, Mark feared they might react, might perceive the startled animal as a threat, might try to capture it, like the specimens in their ship. Instead, they hesitated. Then, without warning, they moved, but not toward the raccoon. The departure. Fluidly, in complete synchronization, they retrieved the tool bag, lifting it effortlessly as if its weight was nothing. Their six-fingered hands moved in flawless precision, flicking across the devices they had examined, ensuring every piece was accounted for. The metallic table, though sturdy, folded into itself, compacting in a way that defied engineering Mark had ever seen. It was as if space itself compressed around it, collapsing into a smooth, flat disk that one of them slipped beneath its arm. Then, with no farewell, no hesitation, they stepped toward the shimmering portal. The pulsing light around them intensified. The air tightened, just like before, and then they were gone. The portal twisted, contracted. Its colors flashed violently, shifting from deep red to an unsettling void of absolute black, as though existence itself was sealing shut. Then, nothing. No light, no hum, no figures. Just Mark, the overturned dirt, a few scattered alien devices, and the distant sound of a raccoon crashing through the underbrush, oblivious to the history it had just interrupted. The aftermath. Mark finally exhaled, his lungs burning from holding his breath far too long. He didn't know if he was relieved or terrified. They had left, but they had seen him. They had understood that someone had been watching, even if they hadn't confronted him, even if they had chosen to leave without retrieval. What did that mean? Was he safe? Or was this only the beginning of something far worse? Mark pressed his fingers against the alien device still clutched in his grip, the last remnant of what had just happened. And as he looked around, at the now empty clearing, at the eerie silence swallowing the forest whole, he had one thought that wouldn't leave his mind. They will come back. And next time, they may not leave so easily. Chapter 10. The Last Remnant. Mark stood motionless, his pulse steadying, but his thoughts racing beyond control. What had started as frustration, the failure to act, the loss of undeniable proof, had given way to something stranger. Relief. Perhaps in the grand scheme of things, his survival outweighed the loss of documentation. He glanced once more at the empty spot where the portal had collapsed in on itself, folding into the very fabric of space, like it had never existed at all. The forest was still, but not peacefully so. The silence wasn't natural. It pressed against him, heavy and unnatural, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something unseen to emerge. Then, reflexively, Mark patted his jacket. The weight of his phone was still there. Proof. Maybe not perfect, maybe imperfect, blurry, and lacking the full scale of what had just happened, but proof nonetheless. A record of something beyond human comprehension. The burden of truth. His grip on the phone tightened. The photos would serve as a tether, the only tangible evidence of the impossible. But as he stood there, staring at the device, a chilling thought coiled through his mind. Would he always want proof? Or someday, when the weight of what he had seen finally settled, would he wish he had none at all? Would he wish for ignorance? Because sometimes, knowing the universe's secrets was worse than being blissfully unaware of them. And if they returned, If those beings ever stepped through that portal again, would they come back just to observe? Or for something far more deliberate? Mark took a shaky breath, forcing himself to move. There was no turning back. The world might never believe him, but the universe did. And that meant nothing would ever be the same. Not for him, and not for humanity. Chapter 11. The Weight of Secrets. Mark slipped into the tent, breathless, his pulse still thundering in his ears. Every step was measured, precise, stealth sharpened by pure adrenaline, ensuring he didn't disturb the peaceful rhythm of his sleeping companions. Jason shifted slightly in his sleeping bag, oblivious. Ben murmured something incoherent in his dreams. Outside, the campfire's dying embers smoldered softly, their warmth lingering in the air, mixing with the damp scent of earth and pine. It felt normal. It felt wrongly normal, considering what had just happened. The evidence and the relic Mark pulled out his phone, staring at the glowing numbers on the screen. AM. Only 3 hours had passed since he had stepped into something beyond human understanding, since his entire perception of reality had shifted. 3 hours. But it felt like years compressed into fleeting seconds. His photos were proof, a digital archive of everything: the portal, the alien ship, the cages, the devices. But what lay hidden in his backpack? That was something else entirely. He could still feel it, as if the tiny device had a pulse of its own, a soft hum, a frequency that wasn't random, but intentional. It was alive in its own way. A signal, or a tool, or worse, a beacon? The thought that wouldn't leave. Mark swallowed hard, shutting off his phone screen, plunging himself into the quiet darkness of the tent. He had proof. He had something tangible, something the world would never believe. And yet, part of him wished he had none at all. Because ignorance was safe. But this was a door to something terrifying, and it had already begun to open. Mark squeezed his eyes shut. Sleep wouldn't come. Not now. Not after tonight. Because this wasn't just another camping trip anymore. And whatever lay beyond the stars, it wasn't done with him yet. Silence. Before the storm. Mark collapsed onto his sleeping bag, his limbs heavy with fatigue, each muscle quietly protesting the strain of the night. His body begged for rest, but his mind was a thunderstorm. Outside the thin canvas of the tent, the world remained unchanged. Crickets chirped lazily in the underbrush, and a gentle breeze whispered through the tall pines. But to Mark, nothing felt the same. Only an hour left before Mr. Riley's alarm buzzed to life, and the quiet hum of breakfast duty, tent roll-ups and merit badge chatter swallowed the campsite. But now, in this sliver of time between dark and dawn, he was alone with a truth too big for 13 years of life to hold. His eyes stared at the tent's ceiling, the material faintly glowing as the earliest traces of morning crept through. Should I tell Mr. Riley? He imagined it, pulling his scoutmaster aside, revealing the photos, maybe even the device itself. Maybe Riley would listen, believe him. Or maybe he'd call the authorities, the government, the military, people with badges and bulletproof vests who wouldn't hesitate to take everything Mark had seen, learned, held, and bury it. Not out of malice, but from the cold, unyielding grip of secrecy. His hand drifted to the phone beside him. The screen was dark, but it felt like it was radiating heat, like the images stored inside it knew they were extraordinary. The ship's hallways, the cages, the portal glowing like the mouth of another reality. What if I just showed Jason and Ben, he thought. They're my best friends. But what if they laughed? What if they told someone? A slip of the tongue at school, at home, and then it would all be out of his control. His fingers brushed the hidden zipper of his backpack. Inside, the alien device, still nestled in fleece and denim, humming low, like a secret that wanted to be kept. And yet, it also felt like a secret that wanted to be understood. A deep ache settled into his chest. Not fear, not dread, something heavier. Responsibility. like the weight of a discovery that wasn't meant for adults in white lab coats or generals in bunkers, but for him, a kid who had stumbled into history while looking for a place to pee. He clenched the phone tighter. Would anyone even believe the truth? Or would he become the cautionary tale, the boy who cried alien? Outside, a single bird chirped, then another. The forest, unaware of the cosmic shift that had happened beneath its canopy, was waking up. Mark exhaled and finally let his shoulders drop. Not everything had to be decided now. The moment would come. But for now, he let exhaustion pull him under, the sounds of morning forest chatter washing over him like a lullaby wrapped in bark and pine. And as he drifted off, half awake, half altered, he whispered one quiet truth to himself. Nothing is ever going to be the same. Chapter 12. Not the same kid who woke up yesterday. Mark hoisted his backpack with the same ease he'd done dozens of times before, but it felt heavier now, not just from the hidden alien artifact nestled in its folds, but from the burden of knowing something no one else did. The forest around him, once a place of comfort and adventure, now pulsed with a quiet intensity. The sunlight filtered differently through the canopy. The wind whispered secrets he wasn't sure were ever meant for human ears. Behind him, Jason laughed, some crack about Bigfoot dancing in the creek. Ben responded with an exaggerated howl, mimicking a werewolf, and they both cackled, rolling up their sleeping bags like the world hadn't tilted overnight. Mark forced a smile, but his eyes betrayed him. Because while his friends were still living in campfire stories, he had wandered into something real. Each whisper from the trees made his muscles twitch. He tried to convince himself it was all over, that they had left, that he had gotten lucky. But that gaze, the way that alien being had paused, not in hostility, not even in curiosity, but in a kind of silent acknowledgement, it haunted him. They hadn't just seen him, they'd noticed him. And that changed everything. Jason walked up beside him, nudging his shoulder. "Dude, you were totally out of it this morning. You okay?" Mark blinked, searching for a reply that wouldn't unravel him. "I didn't sleep well," he mumbled, which technically wasn't a lie. Ben joined them, smirking. "Bet he saw Bigfoot, too. Maybe you found a secret portal to Sasquatch's hot tub." The joke hung awkwardly in the air, and Mark managed a weak laugh. But inside, he didn't feel like a kid anymore. He felt like a secret keeper, like someone who had crossed a threshold the others hadn't even seen. And as the troop made their way down the trail, back to cars, to civilization, to their ordinary lives, Mark glanced once more at the tree line. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew this. Summer was over, and the story was just beginning. A secret too big for a backpack. The laughter of Mark's troop felt distant, like echoes bouncing off the trees rather than something he was part of. The others trudged along, their chatter light, their bodies energized by the crisp morning air. But Mark felt like he was walking through two worlds at once. One, the familiar wilderness, unchanged, comforting, filled with the predictable routine of breaking camp and heading home. The other, the unknown, where he carried proof of something unimaginable, something that didn't belong to Earth. The weight of silence. He tightened his grip on his backpack's straps, pressing them deeper against his shoulders. The photos on his phone were still burned into his mind, each snapshot another layer of the truth he hadn't asked for, but now owned. And the device, nestled deep in the folds of fabric, hummed softly, though no one else could hear it. Mark hadn't even dared to pull it out since stuffing it inside last night. The implications of what it was, what it might do, felt too enormous. And the biggest question still loomed. What do I do with it? The choice that kept knocking. Mr. Riley kept talking up ahead. Some story about raccoons invading his tent years ago, sending the troop into fits of laughter. Jason and Ben were wrapped up in their own theories, debating loudly whether Mark's distracted mood meant he had seen an actual bear or was simply mourning the lack of s'mores. Mark wanted to laugh. He really did. But the truth was too big for jokes. And the thing inside his pack. It felt too alive to ignore. Every sound, the snapping of twigs, the rustling of wind, felt sharper, like the world around him had subtly shifted, becoming more aware. And as he glanced back over his shoulder, toward the dense wilderness behind them, he couldn't help but feel it, the lingering presence. Not of the aliens, but of the secret they had left behind. The decision would come. Mark knew he couldn't carry this weight forever. At some point the choice would demand to be made, to tell, to hide, to investigate. For now, though, he had one last stretch of trail to walk. And with each step, he felt himself moving further away from the boy who entered the woods days ago, and deeper into something much, much bigger. Back to reality, or something close to it. The bus lurched to a stop, the familiar crunch of tires over loose gravel pulling Mark from his uneasy slumber. His eyes fluttered open, still thick with restless dreams, the weight of everything he had seen pressing into his thoughts before he even fully rejoined the waking world. For a brief moment, the rhythmic hum of the engine had granted him temporary peace, a lull in the chaos, a moment where he wasn't the keeper of a cosmic mystery. But now, he was back, the parking lot that should feel normal. Parents clustered near their cars, faces alive with eager smiles, waiting for their kids, waiting for camp stories of hikes, badges, and raccoon attacks. The morning sunlight stretched long golden fingers across the pavement, glinting off windshields, turning the cool spring air warm. But as Mark sat up, rubbing his eyes, something about the mundanity of it all felt jarring. How could the world look so normal after what had happened? How could everything be exactly the same when he was completely different? The secret beneath his backpack. Jason nudged him from across the aisle. "Dude, you were dead asleep. Thought we lost you to the void." Mark smirked, but the comment landed closer to reality than Jason realized. He had been somewhere else, not just dreaming, not just tired, but somewhere he couldn't explain. And now, inside his backpack, zipped tightly between layers of clothes, was proof of it. The device, the stolen relic from the alien world. It hadn't made a sound since last night, hadn't pulsed, hadn't shifted. But Mark felt it, like it was waiting. For him, for what came next. And as the bus doors swung open, releasing them back into their everyday lives, Mark swallowed hard. He had a choice to make. And time was running out. The return to normal. Or something like it. The weight of Mark's bag pressed against his shoulders. But the real burden wasn't in the straps. It was in his pocket. In the pictures on his phone. In the alien device buried deep inside his backpack. His mom waved enthusiastically from across the parking lot, her face lit with excitement at his return. His dad, always a little more reserved, gave him a small nod, arms folded against his chest, watching with quiet relief. Around him the troop was alive with energy, their voices spilling out of the bus like pent-up stories finally freed, laughing about their bravest moments, arguing over who actually saw the biggest raccoon, replaying the trip in exaggerated detail. Mark was supposed to be one of them. He wanted to be one of them. But the truth inside his head made it impossible. The split between worlds. He remained seated for a heartbeat longer than necessary, forcing himself to breathe, to separate his inner chaos from the ease of his friends. Jason leaned back through the aisle. "Dude, you good? Your brain stuck in the woods or something?" Ben smirked. Or maybe Bigfoot really did follow him home. The joke landed awkwardly in Mark's mind, not because it wasn't funny, but because if they only knew that something had followed him home, that something was still with him, humming softly in his pack, like a secret waiting to be unwrapped. Mark forced a tight-lipped smile, slinging his bag over his shoulder. "Catch you guys later," he mumbled, avoiding the curious glances, pretending like nothing was off, even though everything was. The decision he wasn't ready for. His feet felt heavier as he stepped off the bus, each movement deliberate, controlled, bracing himself for the inevitable questions, the ones that would come from his parents, from his friends, maybe even from himself. What would he say? Could he tell anyone? Or was this secret his to keep? For now, or maybe forever? The cool morning air settled around him, filling the parking lot with warmth that felt entirely too normal. His friends laughed behind him, already moving on, already returning to a world that had never changed for them. But Mark knew the universe had already shifted, and soon it was going to shift again.